Hello, everyone. Well, guess what? We are just about to get started on plagues, the better part of this class. Well, biology is great too, but the interesting thing about science is the weird stuff that happens, including plagues. So first, we're just going to do a quick review of bacterial cells. I know you just had an exam on these, but the first group of plagues we're going to talk about are bacterial plagues. So I just want to give you a real quick overview of those. So you might remember they're prokaryotes, they're unicellular, they have a cell wall, they have flagella, and they might have fimbriae stuck to them. They might also have a pilus, which connects to another cell and can transfer plasmids. They have cytoplasm, and that's the juicy jello part of the cell. And they do not have membrane bound organelles. Remember that. And they don't have a nucleus. They do have a strand of DNA that's their brains, if you will, just kind of floating around in the cytoplasm. And then they also might have a plasmid that's floating around in the cytoplasm. They reproduce by binary fission. That means one cell divides into two daughter cells, and they live in all kinds of environments. So bacteria can live in very salty environments. They can live in very hot environments like Old Faithful. They found bacteria there. They found bacteria way down in depths of underwater tunnels, and just all over. It's all over, including your body. There's tons on your body too. So what is a plague? So a plague is basically any epidemic disease that's causing a high rate of mortality. You'll see that on the middle description on this slide. So an epidemic, which we've just had, actually we've had a pandemic, but an epidemic is a disease that's affecting a large number of individuals in a population, in a community or a region all at the same time. So Sacramento could have an epidemic, or California could have an epidemic, or even, Placer County, just one small area could have an epidemic. And then plague is an epidemic that's causing mortality. And then a pandemic, pan means world. So a pandemic is a disease that's prevalent over the entire country or the entire world. I guess maybe it doesn't mean world, it just means, all over. So anyway, pandemic, plague, epidemic. Okay. So the bacterial plagues that we're going to take a look at are first the Justinian plague, the Black Death, cholera, consumption, and leprosy. All of these were bacterial plagues that plagued us until the probably the mid to late 1800s, some of them. And then we'll also just touch briefly on E. coli, because that is something that's kind of in the news lately with certain fast food restaurants and things. So that could become a plague, but let's talk about first the Justinian plague. So plague in history meant something like this, just death, destruction, and in most cases, it also meant the Black Death, right? The Black Death is what people think of when they think of the plague. And truly, that was kind of the original first plague that people really kind of knew about, because they knew that it was happening in lots of parts of the world, and it was killing just thousands of people, friends and neighbors and family. It was just horrible. So there were three great plagues, pandemics of plague, and meaning the Black Death or the organism that causes plague. And the first one was in 541. The next one was in 1347, and that's the one most people remember, or what you hear about a lot. And then also another one in 1894. But there was just huge mortality, death of people and animals, surprisingly, not surprisingly, once you know about bacteria, across many nations, many continents, just worldwide. And it really changed the economic and the social fabric of the society. Things really changed in communities and worlds after these great plagues. So the Justinian plague, also the plague of 541 to 549 AD, was occurred in Constantinople, or that's where it originated. It was called Justinian's plague because Justinian I was the emperor of the Roman Empire at that time. And this was a grand part of the Roman Empire, just huge expansion of territory, lots of art, lots of culture, new laws. I think I say here Roman law, the Corpus Juris Civilis. That was what all of our modern laws are built on, because they had such great thinkers in this time, and they had a huge, as I say, huge empire, and so lots of different cultures were brought into this empire and lots of new ideas. And this was originally set up by Constantinople, who was an emperor, and he was the Roman Empire Constantine. In 337, so before the Justinian plague, he moved the capital of the Roman Empire to what was called Byzantium. But then, being, just kind of a little bit of an egotist, he named the city after himself. And so Constantine now formed a city called Constantinople. And this city actually had 500,000 people, which, I mean, in 337, that's unheard of. Most places are like rural with farmers, they might be 4 or 5 families around, but this was a huge city, and it was big, and it was wealthy, and it was just, the dominant city in the entire world. Okay, so in everything that was part of the Roman Empire, all the great thinkers and all the great scientists and all the great philosophers and all of that came to Byzantium or Constantinople. And that was the center of the Roman Empire at that time. They had huge structures, gorgeous shops, beautiful churches, and great homes with lots of beautiful tiles and sculptures, and just gorgeous. Constantinople even, Justinian even created his own coin. That was common in all of ancient history. When a new emperor reigned, they would create their own coin. So here we have Justinian the First. Don't really know if that's a likeness or not. And then this is an image of the Roman Empire at that time. So starting on the left, we can see parts of Spain. We can see Italy. We can see Bulgaria, Greece, Asia Minor. You can see Constantinople up there by Macedonia, parts of Syria, parts of Egypt. And then, of course, they controlled the Mediterranean Sea, which had islands of Crete and Cyprus. Parts of Jerusalem were also part of the Roman Empire. So it was massive, when you think about how big this is. And so the red line is the extent of the empire under Justinian. Okay, so let's move on from there. This is an image, an artist's rendering of what Constantinople might have looked like during that time period. And you can see just huge, gorgeous buildings. And they have a large amphitheater there, or Colosseum, if you will, where they had, sporting events, and some of the other uglier things where, they had gladiators and, all of that. And anyway, Justinian ruled over all of Constantinople at that time. Here's a picture of him looking out the window at his empire. So yeah, he's just looking, out at the empire. You can see that on the tower over there, that's a statue of Constantine, the founder of the city. And there's a church in the background with the dome. And you can see thousands and thousands of people in this Colosseum when he's out there watching. So how did the plague get here? It likely originated in Egypt, and then it spread throughout the Mediterranean by trade and the shipping routes. Also, there was a war with nomadic Huns. Those were up kind of north of China, maybe north and a little bit west of China. And then it got into the outer provinces of the Roman Empire in about 541, so early on. And then it got to Constantinople. And remember, I said there was about 500,000 or 500,000 citizens there, and it was killing about 5,000 people a day. Now, can you imagine? I mean, Sacramento's bigger now, but, Just imagine 5,000 people in Folsom or in Folsom and El Dorado Hills, whatever, dying, 5,000 people a day. That it's shocking. It's just shocking. Even so, that the court historian Procopius of Caesarea said the pandemic spread so quickly that they were seized by the disease without becoming aware of what was coming, either through a waking vision or a dream. They were just sick that quick. And they didn't know, they were like just out and, comatose or just so sick that they could not even understand what was happening to them. It was really bad times. So the healers at the time, they followed the teachings of Galen, and you might remember him. And that was he thought that there were opposites. Opposites were cures for the four humors, and the four humors, if you might remember, were blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And so, if you treated these things with their opposite, then you would theoretically get a cure. So earth, air, fire, and water would be the things that would help those type of things. During this time, there was a great deal of Christianity at this time. You might recall, not everyone. There were still a lot of Jewish communities, and then the Roman emperors. They followed their own gods, but cremation was not a Christian option at that time. And so the buildings, towers, homes all started filling up with corpses. Bodies even started piling up on the street, and some were dumped into the sea. It was, just imagine 5,000 people a day. How do you even get rid of that many bodies? I mean, in a week, that's 35,000 people. Ugh. There was a mass graveyard in Galatia, and that was soon filled with over 70,000 corpses. And historians describe that smell of taking over the city for months and months, just death everywhere. So here's an artist's view of Constantinople at that time. You can see people dying, people, avoiding the smell, bodies being carried away, people panicking, of course, people begging for help, just really not good. Well, then it went from bad to worse. So, of course, merchants and businesses closed their door. Either they had sick families, they were sick themselves, or they just said, I don't want any of these people coming in my door. So they closed their doors. There were fewer farmers because farmers, off their families died or they died and they could not sustain their farm. And then agriculture collapsed, and then crops died, and then there was not enough food. So there was starvation, or if you were wealthy enough, then you could afford some food, but it was so expensive that it was you got very little for your money. And Procopius, again, the court historian, said it wiped out much of the farming community, causing desolation and hunger. So if the farming community, anyway, you get the picture. Just lack of farms, all shut down, and no food being produced. So of course there was famine. But this little Emperor Justinian, not so nice. He had to support his lifestyle, or had to support the troops and all the things that are needed by the state. And so he still required the annual tax. And here's the bad part. I mean, that's not so bad, right? I mean, we all have to pay taxes, and it goes to the greater good, all of that. But in this case, the individual had to pay their own tax. And if they had a dead neighbor, they had to pay their tax as well. So that was really kind of unfair. But because the loss of funding, the army got much weaker and much smaller. And then it was unable to stop attacks of invading tribes and Huns and just, other countries. So the result of this plague was, of course, disease. It was hunger, it was war, and it was poverty. This is actually, Justinian actually did get the plague himself, but he was cured, or he recovered. I don't know if he was cured, but he survived at any rate. So during this time, the Justinian plague killed a quarter of the world's population, and it greatly diminished the size and the power of the Roman Empire, obviously because of the disease, the lack of money, famine, etc. And plague continued to occur in the Mediterranean area, all of that Mediterranean, for another 225 years. So it would come and it would go and it would affect one city and then it would go and then it affect another city. And, then a ship would come in and spread plague. And so it just kept going and kept going. And the collapse of the economy or the Roman Empire then led to what's called feudalism. You may have heard about that, but that's the social structure that took over in Europe at that time. So this is, again, I just want to describe the Justinian Empire. And again, that's the entirety of that red line. And then these are the proposed origins and the route of the plague. So if you look kind of down, Alexandria is there. That's Egypt right down there. And that's where they thought it had originated. And then you can see all the shipping routes that are taking it to other places. And all the starred areas are the date that it arrived there and, just when the disease occurred. Okay. And then this is just another map, if you will, that shows the extent of the damage to the Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire. And you can see that the Byzantine Empire is only those areas that are in the pinkish red color. So it has shrunk considerably from the original picture where, the Roman Empire, Byzantium, etc., included nearly all of this, including some of Spain, some of France, some of uh, the Arabian countries, Egypt, some of Africa. So it was devastating, purely devastating. But that's not the end of plague, but that is the end of our lecture for today. So I'll continue on with the Black Death next.